How many of you listening right now have kind of steered yourself, or maybe you did in the past, you steered yourself toward a specific career path? And when I say that, I mean, think about maybe post-secondary or even in secondary school, you kind of chose courses, or in post-secondary more specifically, you chose probably the entire course to be a certain thing. Maybe you wanted to be an electronics engineer. Maybe you were in computer science. Maybe you specifically wanted to code Xbox games, or you wanted to be an art designer, art director, or something like that for video games. Or maybe you were doing something completely different. Maybe you decided that you wanted to be like a botanist and you wanted to, grow plants and learn about all of that. And then somehow, some reason, you steered in that direction and then you just ended up somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened to our guest today, but also to Mike and I to an extent. It wasn't as drastic as something like, hey, we went and learned tech and then we decided to, become farmers or something like that. But tech itself is so vast that at the end of the day, you can really set yourself on a path like, hey, I want to learn about hardware and learn how to code on ICs or integrated circuits, just like Mike and I did in college. And then we end up coding up websites, which is really kind of drastically different. Like Mike and I learned all about networks and all kinds of other things. And it's kind of like the journey that our guest, Jesse Hall, had, and he'll detail in our interview today. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And if you want to help not only yourself, but us as well, you can net yourself up to 20% off a Scrimba Pro plan. And you can find that link in the show description and the show notes, and full details on how to use that link will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And remember that we are powered by CodeRabbit. They give you the power of AI code reviews to help cut your code review time in half. Check out the link in the show notes and episode description to net yourself a 14-day free trial, no credit card needed, and just a 2-click sign up if you have a GitHub or GitLab account. So today we'll be airing a call, like I kind of alluded to in that introduction, that Mike had with Jesse Hall. Jesse Hall is a staff developer advocate at MongoDB, and they'll be discussing Jesse's introduction to tech from hardware and working at Geek Squad to software engineering and eventually YouTubing as well. They also chat about MongoDB and how AI has changed things over there over the past couple of years. So this interview is just absolutely packed, and I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's cut to that interview right now.
All right. I have Jesse Hall on the line. Super excited to talk all things Mongo and really developer education too, because you've been a developer advocate for quite some time now. So really want to know more about you, Jesse, and your journey leading up to you becoming a senior / staff developer advocate at MongoDB. So can you kind of take us through how you went from, like, I think you went through Geek Squad. A lot of us have been through that before, to self-taught educator. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, by the way. And I don't know how much of a backstory you want, so the editors can feel free to cut whatever they want out of this if I ramble too much. But like going back to the very beginning in high school, like I always knew that I wanted to do something with computers. At the time, the computers that we had floppy disks, and so like that was quite a long time ago. But I had so much fun working with those computers, and I didn't come from a well-off background, so I couldn't afford to go to college. But I did do very well in high school, so I got a scholarship to go to a local community college. And they didn't have computer science back then. So I went to school for electronics technology. And so that's, the hardware side of things. And so that got me into building clone computers and like computer hardware and, the Geek Squad type thing. So I worked for a bunch of mom and pop shops for a while, worked my way up to like large scale servers and networks, and networking. And then I went into design, like the actual design and implementation of these large scale networks. And that's kind of what got me from Geek Squad to Best Buy corporate, and then designing all of these hardware components. And then I transitioned there into software engineering, where I was building software for internal applications at Best Buy. And the transition there, go back just a little bit more, is I never thought that I was smart enough for the software side of things. Like software seemed like magic. It seemed like rocket science. Like the hardware, like that's physical. Like that's okay, no problem. It's physical. I can plug things together. I can install the operating system. That's about as far as I went on the software side. But there was this application that we had to use that it was very time consuming data entry from one system to another system. I was like, there's got to be some better way. And so I started Googling and Python popped up. And so like in no time, I had this little script running that just quickly did these things for me in the background. And that is what made it click for me, that it's actually doable. Like anybody can learn how to do these things. And that, anyway, that's what hooked me. And so I transitioned into software development and then did that for a while. And then I decided to start this YouTube channel and that took off. And then I found out there's this thing called developer advocacy that I had no idea of. And basically that is teaching developers how to do things. And so, I started applying and landed at MongoDB. That's the short story. There's another little backstory there about how I started the YouTube channel. But anyway, that's like the transition between hardware side to software side, and then on into teaching.
It's really interesting. I think you and I actually had very similar backgrounds. Same with Matt, actually, the other co-host on the show, where we went hardware first. So we actually both finished also in community college computer engineering tech. Which was, microcontrollers and it was all hardware pretty much. Very little programming involved other than like C and that kind of stuff. And I would say it's interesting that you also went through that like phase of like software is magic. I bet you most people think that hardware is much more like magic box. I know it's like physical, but like if you look at like a cell phone, like everything that goes into a cell phone, like that's crazy amount of hardware tech that like there's just so much packed into there. It's kind of hard to even comprehend. Whereas if you look at a website, and I think, again, it's that bias of like where we're at now, where like we understand the technology, where I think a website is just much more clear. But again, I think it depends where you're at in your career and when you're in your life, where that magic box is going to be. So it's interesting that you went that way too.
It is. Maybe we take it for granted today because there's information is so readily available today. So looking at it back then, the internet, dating myself again, but the internet back then was brand new. There was no YouTube. To learn something, you had to go buy a book and you had to read and you had to figure it out on the software side, the hardware side, whatever it is. And so it just seemed much more daunting back then to me at the time. Today, you just pull up YouTube and learn anything, literally anything. It's just there. So it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's a super cool transition. And I think the pioneering age, that's what I like to call that stage of software developers, where they went before everything on the internet became super mainstream and had to go into the books. We've had a couple people on the podcast that started that way. And like, hats off to you. I think I started like a little bit after that, maybe like, 10 years or 8 years down the line from that. So I had pretty good resources. Stack Overflow was my resource at the time when I was first starting, especially for like debugging and stuff. So I was a little bit ahead of that. But like, yeah, I just don't know how you guys did it. I think it really did limit the amount of people that could get in, because I think you had to be that like self-driven person that was able to read those data sheets, read the documentation in books, and somehow extrapolate that out into working other kinds of code on the screen.
Yeah, just a lot of tinkering. Just try it out, see what works, see what doesn't. Because again, there was no Stack Overflow, so you had a problem. You just had to keep tinkering until you figured it out.
Yeah, absolutely, super cool. I mean, you've done a lot of really amazing work with codeSTACKr. Really cool YouTube channel, really cool blog platform. People should check it out. We're definitely going to have all the links in the show notes, so please go check that out. But I'm just curious, like when you're teaching someone or when you're doing a demonstration, what principles do you think make a technical concept kind of click? You mentioned the word click already in the episode, actually, specifically for like a beginner developer.
Yeah. Just I want to say the only thing I can think of is dumbing it down, but that's a bad term. But like making it as simple as possible. It can be a very complex subject, but how do you break that subject down into its most simple components and then explaining those? That's the easiest way to explain it, I guess, is just break it down. And you have to understand, coming from a beginner who doesn't know anything, you have to take it from their viewpoint. If you are a master at whatever it is, JavaScript, and you try to teach a beginner, you've gone through that entire journey, but likely you've forgotten those few little tidbits at the very beginning that made it click for you because you've been doing it for so long. When you learn something and teach at the same time, that's where I like to tell people. A lot of people tell me, how do I get into content creation? How do I start doing things? Basically, just document your journey. Teach things as you're learning them, because the important thing is to remember what made it click for you, and then teach it that way. Or just, tweet about it. Hey, I just learned this thing and this is what made it click for me. That's content creation right there. And so teaching people the way it clicked for you, it's gonna click for somebody else the same way, right? And that's another reason, like, a lot of people say, well, the content creation space is so saturated. There's so many people creating content and trying to teach people these concepts. Well, you teach differently. I teach differently. I could teach the exact same subject as you teach, but what made it click for me and how I teach it might make it click for other people, and then vice versa for you as well. So, like, sky's the limit. Just put your ideas out there, and when something clicks for you, make that piece of content that helps somebody else.
Yeah, I love that. I love that advice. I especially find it difficult, and I sometimes get into the cycle as well, where, like, you're learning something and you're shy, or like you're hesitant to teach it because you're learning it. Mm-hmm. But absolutely what you're saying, like, the foundational model of that is like, hey, while you're learning it, that's the best time to almost teach it, because as soon as it clicks for you, that's where you have that context of like, oh, it's clicked for me as a beginner. That's how I need to teach it for someone else. So, like, I hope people listening to this really take that advice to heart. It's something that I struggled with initially, and like something I've overcome and still overcoming. But as you're learning, not only does it also solidify your own knowledge by teaching it, like everyone knows that kind of that cycle, but you're going to help someone, even if it's one person. Like, you're going to help someone.
Exactly. And to that point of maybe imposter syndrome, maybe you're not teaching something authoritatively. Like, you're just saying, this is the thing that I learned today, and this is what made it click for me. Did I get this right? And maybe someone might chime in, and maybe you're actually wrong. Maybe you're completely off base. Well, that's a good thing for you too, because we're learning in public. We're saying the things that made it click for us. And maybe we're wrong, and somebody else chimes in and says, no, it's actually this way. Oh, okay, thank you. We all just learned it together.
Yeah, being okay to be wrong, right? Like, being okay being okay with, like, the negative feedback that you get. Sometimes it's a little bit harsh. It's okay. Like, yeah, take that and put that into your own cycle and get better and better. And then as you learn to teach, you'll know what to kind of filter out and what to let in. But yeah, it's absolutely the case. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jesse. I think we can kind of go into where you're at now, because we talked about, like, your journey up until the point you're at MongoDB, which is a super interesting platform for me, because that was the first database that I ever interacted with as a web developer. And it was the first one that actually clicked for me, which is interesting, because I think, again, I was going into the phase of like, hey, I was just a front-end developer, and then I was like, okay, what do I do with this data? Like, how do I control it so that it's not always ethereal and just disappearing all the time? And I was working with JSON objects at the time, obviously, and MongoDB popped up as like, oh, it just stores JSON, right? So it made perfect sense for that transition for me, and I always loved describing that and like recommending people that path if they're in the same thing. But yeah, I kind of want to know your journey with MongoDB a little bit too. Like, what's the thing that led you there?
Yeah, so I actually started with, well, like many developers, started with SQL. And when I was working at Best Buy as a very big Microsoft shop there, so we used Microsoft SQL, and that was, the thing that I knew. And my initial opinion of MongoDB, I had used it here and there, but my opinion was that it's just a toy database. It's just, just throw some stuff in there. It's messy and don't worry about it. SQL is, much more structured. And that's the point. That's the point for SQL, to be structured in that way. But then moving over into MongoDB and like really learning the fundamentals of it and how it has grown since its early days. A lot of developers that I talk to, I'll ask them, okay, when's the last time that you used MongoDB? And a lot of times they'll say, 5 or 6 years ago. Well, a lot has happened in 5 or 6 years. It's no longer just a document store. It's no longer, I consider it not as a NoSQL database or a non-relational database, because those terms they have like a negative connotation to them, and they're actually misleading. So MongoDB is actually a general purpose database. It can actually be used for any use case. Like a lot of people, developers will say, well, I don't have a use case for MongoDB. Well, it's actually anything. It can do anything. So another misconception is that it is schemaless. Like the sky's the limit, just throw stuff in there. Well, it has a flexible schema. You can just throw stuff in there, but you shouldn't just throw stuff in there. It can be as strict as you want. There's actually a JSON schema validation that you can set up. So the nice part about it is you can get a proof of concept going very quickly, and you can iterate very quickly. You don't have to worry about migrations and all the things. But once you get to that point where your schema is locked in, you should lock it in. You should make it strict, just like SQL is strict. And you can have relationships, and you can do all the things. You can do lookups and, joins. They're called lookups in MongoDB. You can do all the things in MongoDB that you can do in SQL. It's just easier to iterate.
That's a really good way to put it, I think, and kind of resonates with how I work as well. A lot of times, like I kind of take a SQL database and make it that, like, really flexible using something like an ORM, right? Like to allow you to have that flexibility. But you're right where you say, like, I could just throw it into Mongo and have that out of the box. Like I don't have to add anything to it. So that's a really good workflow, especially for people out there that are kind of going through that like startup phase, like they're just trying to iterate really quickly without having to lock in everything. I really appreciate that kind of like thought process for Mongo. Is there anything that actually differs greatly? Like, let's say someone is very much, MySQL, Postgres heavy. They get into Mongo. Is there really something that they have to drastically adapt to right away, or is the on-ramp kind of smoother now?
So the difference is just going from the SQL queries to MongoDB queries, and just the mindset really is the mindset transition. So instead of normalizing your data and having, if let's say you've got a user database and you've got your user table, you've got your address table, your phone numbers table, you've got all these different tables, you would just have to think about how you're going to set up your database structure a little bit differently. So in a relational world, you start with the data, and there's really just one way to store that data, and then you query it, right? From the MongoDB perspective, you do the opposite. You look at your application layer. What do your queries look like? What data do you need for this query? And that's how you should structure your data. So if you always need the user's address and the user's phone number, you would store that all in the same collection. And just the relationship is inherent within the collection because you have arrays within the collection there. So you have documents within documents, basically. So that's the relationship there. But let's say that you don't need the addresses right away. You need the addresses later. Well, then you can put the addresses in a separate collection and pull them in using a join, we call it a lookup, whenever it's needed, right? So there's different ways of doing things. That's the difference. So like in SQL, there's one way of doing it. In MongoDB, there's a million ways of doing it. And it's just a matter of, again, starting from your application layer, what queries are you making? And storing your data so that query can make as little joins or lookups as possible, so they can pull that data in one shot and not have to do all this extra stuff.
Would you say that the main component, the main feature there is the unlimited flexibility?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. So I always tell developers as well, like, I'm not going to say that MongoDB is the absolute best every single time. If you are just doing a proof of concept and you put MongoDB up against Postgres, they're going to be neck and neck, right? The key differentiator is when you go to production. When you start scaling, that's when you see the key differences, especially if you're doing something like trying to use Postgres as a document store using like JSONB or something. Like the charts are just crazy, like how quickly they spike in Postgres and how level they stay in MongoDB. So it's really when you start scaling, that's when you see the big differences.
Can you explain what you mean by document store? Because I think, and if we have some junior developers listening to this, they might think like, are you putting Word docs in there? But
yeah, document. So we refer to objects as documents, basically. So a JSON object we call that a document. And it's actually not stored as JSON in MongoDB. It's stored as BSON, so binary JSON basically, and it adds some extra data types to that JSON object basically. And you don't have to worry about that. That's all done under the hood. But basically, it's your JSON object is what we call a document. You can have documents within documents because you can have within JSON, you can have objects within objects, right? So it's the same thing. And that's the differentiator there. A lot of developers will say, well, you can't store relationships in MongoDB. It's non-relational, right? Those relationships are inherent within the documents with a document-to-document inheritance, or within other collections where you can do those lookups as well.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Is there a limit to how many relationships down, like how far the tree can go?
That's a good question. I would have to look that up.
Yeah,
I would have to
always
look that
wondered
up.
that actually. It probably
if there is a limitation, it's a lot, whatever it is.
Okay, probably not going to hit it. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a very good overview of what MongoDB is now, like today. And I think that's really key because you're right that I believe in the zeitgeist, in production, in real life, is probably being used a ton everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
The zeitgeist kind of, it goes up and down always.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of bring it back in a little bit, especially with this episode where people can go and look for themselves and see what it is. And at this point, you can do whatever you want with it, obviously. And that's a really, really cool aspect.
Yeah.
To move on to the next part, and I think the part that is really interesting for me, especially, like I've been working with this like AI in general for a little while now. And I know MongoDB is also kind of taking steps to support different workflows for AI development, RAG, and stuff like that. Can you kind of go through and describe how MongoDB has adapted to that space in the last few years? Is there anything special you had to do or anything like that?
Yeah, so it really is just an iteration on our Atlas cloud offering. So you can download MongoDB and use it for free locally. You can host it yourself completely for free, or you can use our cloud offering, MongoDB Atlas, which you just don't have to worry about all the headache of hosting and deploying and all that sort of stuff. We do that for you. So within Atlas, we have had full text search for a long time. So that is powered by Lucene. So same as something like Elasticsearch or whatever, but it's like built into MongoDB. So just expanding on that, adding the vector search functionality. So the vector search functionality also uses Lucene under the hood. And so basically that's what we announced a couple of years ago as built-in vector search. More recently, MongoDB acquired Voyage AI, and Voyage AI is one of the leading embeddings model creators, and so what we're working on, it's in private preview right now, is auto embedding. And so when you write something to the database, it will auto embed that for you, and then it's ready to go in your semantic search or your vector search pipeline.
Very cool. That's a really interesting feature. So you don't have to set up your own like RAG pipeline or anything like that, really. At least the embeddings part of it.
Exactly, the embeddings part. Yeah. So just the user queries, you have to create an embedding on that user query and then just go straight off to vector search in MongoDB. So just eliminates that one step there of having to chunk and embed and save. It will auto embed for you, auto do all the things for you, auto magically.
I mean, I liked auto magically, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then where we're really trying to position ourselves is like the memory provider in that layer there. So you're chatting with the application. We want the chat history to be stored there in MongoDB. We want obviously your custom data is there that you can talk with, right? And then that entire session history can all live in that one place alongside even your operational data. So today we see a lot of companies with all of these bolt-on solutions where they've got 3, 4, maybe 5 different databases doing different things, and then they've got Elasticsearch over here for the search, right? And then you have to orchestrate all this stuff. With MongoDB, it's all in one place. You don't have to do any of that orchestration.
Yeah, that's a very cool use case actually, because I raised my hand there for anyone not watching this, but I definitely have that right now. Like we have like a Pinecone DB over here. We have like all these other PG vectors over there. Like we do use quite a few products just to handle what you're talking about right now in our orchestration of the AI pipeline, the RAG pipeline. So it does kind of sound appealing to have it all under one database and just handling the model relationships. Does the document store infrastructure? I could see that scaling pretty well actually for stuff like that, like the history and everything.
Yeah, it's just arrays of numbers. It's like that's MongoDB is made for that. MongoDB is made for unstructured data, structured data, like whatever it is, you throw it at it, it can handle it. Now, of course, you do want to think about, again, how you're going to be querying your data. So if you have some queries hitting this collection that has these huge vectors in it, that query is not needing those vectors, that's going to slow it down, right? So again, look at your queries and structure your data appropriately, because you could put everything into one document and you have this big bloated document. That's going to make your database super slow, your queries super slow, right? So you have to just be strategic about how you store the data, but it can all be done right there in one place.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I think like you've done your own kind of experimentation at this point with AI in different aspects, not just the MongoDB side, but actually like creating applications end to end. I think there was a talk that you gave called AI in 2 lines, or at least a part of the talk had AI in 2 lines as the phrase that would kind of like really cool key phrase. I really like that. Can you talk about what you meant when you said like you can do this in 2 lines, and what the real roadmap would be from like a toy chatbot, which I think you can create really quickly nowadays, to an actual robust agentic system that's deployed and used by thousands of people?
Yeah, so the gist of that was how easy it is to implement AI into your application. Literally 2 lines of code. For that, I was using the Vercel AI SDK, which is an amazing package. Basically 2 lines of code. Maybe I kind of fibbed a little bit on that, but it was basically 2 lines of code to get AI into your application, right? So super easy, like you said, super easy to get a chatbot going. And that's kind of where we're at right now with AI. Is where is it going to go? Is are chat interfaces the end all be all? Like, how are we going to interact with these in the future? And so one really cool thing that I've seen lately is UI elements within chat. So for instance, you ask the chat to buy some tickets for some concert, right? And it comes up with an entire UI, gives you a list of concerts, and you actually interact. Like you check buttons, you put your credit card in, you hit buy, and that's all right there within the chat interface, right? And so instead of just blocks of text back and forth like a text back and forth with the chat, it's actually pulling up websites and UI elements to have you interact with things. So I don't know. I think that's pretty promising. Is that the way? I'm still questioning if that the way that we should be interacting with things. Maybe, but like we're at such a still early development phase of AI, and that's the fun part. It still kind of is the Wild West, but we're still figuring things out. And that's fun. It's fun to start building things and seeing what limits you can push and seeing what you can come up with, because you might be the one that comes up with the next evolution of how we interact with AIs.
Yeah, it's very true. Like we're on this weird edge of like, okay, it's already being used everywhere for some reason, even though you're right that it's very early on. And yet we don't know how it's actually going to be used 5 years down the line. Like it could be a completely different ecosystem that we don't even know. So like if you're listening to this 5 years from now, you could be like, what do you mean chat? Like we don't care about that anymore. And that could be a very realistic scenario where everything right now that's AI powered pretty much is chat related. So it's really interesting that you're kind of going through that right now. Because I think a lot of developers out there are going through it, and I hope they are, because there's some developers that are a little bit skeptical, and that's fine. Like skepticism is good in this space. But I feel like there's also, like, if you're too skeptical, you can kind of like get yourself out of the ecosystem. Like we see that where it's going. And the reality is if you don't kind of embrace it to a certain degree, it's going to be a hindrance for you. Like, I'm curious on your take on this, or maybe while you're at MongoDB as well, like how much tooling, AI tooling, autocomplete, the cursors of the world, how much are you using? How much are you kind of like pushing back on and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's a key differentiator there, is talking about these 2 different topics, really. We have the topic of integrating AI into your application to help your end user. And then we have using AI to help you build that application, right? And so when I think about this, the best analogy that I've heard or come up with is you think about, 50 years ago, 60 years, I don't know how long ago it was that power tools were invented. But before power tools, people were building houses by hand, like cutting with a handsaw and a hammer, right? And then power tools were invented. Can you imagine those home builders that were skeptical and said, I am not going to buy those power tools. They're just, I don't need that. I can keep going by hand, right? And then these new builders come up with the power tools and they're building houses like left and right so fast and they're making so much money. But guess what? With that comes that inherent risk of maybe not cutting corners, but like going too fast, right? To where the quality is not as good. So if you buy an older house that was hand built, that's a pretty quality house. Like it was sturdy and strong, right? And some of these newer houses, there's maybe not so much, right? So that's kind of the analogy that I go with is AI is just a tool. It is a tool that is going to help you move faster. And you really do need to learn how to use that tool because the question is always, is AI going to take my job? Yes and no. Yes, it might take your job if you don't embrace it and don't learn how to use it, because you'll be working slower than everyone else that is using it, right? So it's just a matter of understanding what it can do, what its limitations are. You still have to know what you're doing. You still have to know the AI is writing bad code and how to fix that, right? Or tell the AI, prompt the AI correctly so that it writes good code, right? But just learning, I think this is just going to be a learning phase for all of us. And the quicker you jump on board, I think the better it will be for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I kind of asked that question of pretty much every guest that we've had on for the last year or so, because I'm trying to find someone that pushes back hard on it. And I haven't found one yet. Like everyone that we've had on the show, I would consider to be a very high class developer, like either senior, staff, whatever. And I think it's important for the audience to hear this, especially the skeptical audience, that this is what they're saying. It's not a gimmick. It's not at the point where it can replace you today. Sure. But if you don't embrace it, you're going to be behind. So I appreciate the candor there. I appreciate you talking like that. I think it is important to talk about a little bit here and there without going too far into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about it from our end. I kind of want to give you some time, Jesse, to talk about what you're working on right now. Any links you want to share, we'll have them all in your show notes for when this episode is released.
Yeah, so at MongoDB, I'm mainly in the web dev space. So I'm focusing a lot on AI actually right now in the web dev space. So working a lot with the Vercel AI SDK, LangChain, Mostra. These are some really great AI frameworks that work well with MongoDB. And so just I'm creating content around those. So look out for some of those on the MongoDB YouTube channel. September 17th, I'm going to be in New York. So if any of the listeners are in the New York area, there is a MongoDB event going on there at the Javits Center on September 17th. So come by and say hi. And then on the personal note, I'm just still putting content out on my YouTube channel as well. Again, in the web dev space, not specifically around MongoDB, just web dev in general. So check that out if you are so inclined.
That's codeSTACKr, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, if you want to look them up. But the links will be in the show notes as well.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Jesse. It was great having you on. Hopefully we have you on in the future when we talk about how AI has revolutionized MongoDB again or something like that.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you again for having me.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as we did, but it is now time to end. And just a reminder that Jesse's links will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. Go check out those show notes and you can click on those links and learn about his YouTube channel and other things that he discussed in the interview. And if you would like to support episodes like this, you can do so on Patreon. That is via patreon.com/htmlallthethings, just like these fine people did in the $3 tier. Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And just a reminder that we have that Scrimba link. You can net yourself up to 20% 20% off a Scrimba Pro plan. Go check out that link and all the details in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to Michael Araka, contributing author on htmlallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. And we are powered, of course, by Code Rabbit. Go and check out the link in the show description or in the show notes where you can net yourself a 14-day free trial, no credit card needed, and just a 2-click sign up with a GitHub or GitLab account. Go and I guess empower yourself really with the power of AI code reviews to help cut your code review time in half. And that's it. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.